The 3rd century of the Islamic calendar was an era of massive information consolidation. Localized pockets of knowledge scattered across the Middle East and Central Asia were rapidly merging into a globalized, standardized canon. In any pre-digital information network, data has to physically travel. That movement relies on hub nodes, single points of convergence where individuals collect, store, and redistribute vast amounts of information. In the early 9th century, the ultimate hub node for Islamic traditions was a scholar named Qutayba ibn Sa'id. Beginning his journey in the ancient region of Balkh in modern-day Afghanistan, Qutayba traveled thousands of miles across the empire to physically gather data. By the time he finished, his personal ledgers were staggering in scale. Historical records indicate he successfully transmitted over 100,000 distinct texts during his lifetime. He functioned as a human bridge, physically carrying the localized memory of 2nd-century scholars directly into the foundational texts of the 3rd century. Mapping this architecture, Qutayba sits directly in the center. Data flows into him from regional 2nd-century masters like Imam Malik and al-Layth. That data is then routed outward, feeding directly into 3rd-century compilations by Bukhari, Muslim, and Tirmidhi. Qutayba was independently wealthy, possessing massive agricultural estates. Without that wealth funding his physical logistics, the transition to the globalized books of the Islamic canon would have faced a severe bottleneck. The compilers of that canon did not blindly accept Qutayba's 100,000 texts simply because he was a wealthy, famous traveler. His claims were subjected to a rigorous mechanism of pre-modern peer review. His actual handwritten ledgers had to be audited by independent experts. In one documented instance, 2 of the era's strictest data critics, Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in, spent the night meticulously cross-examining Qutayba's books. They employed a physical markup system to log their verifications. Any text marked with red ink meant it was verified by Ahmad, while green ink signified Yahya's verification. We can see visual proxies for this verification algorithm in surviving Arabic manuscripts, where colored accent marks track the specific layers of review applied to the text. Following this exhaustive audit, Qutayba earned the grain of thiqa, the consensus designation for a highly reliable transmitter. The network's underlying rigor is best observed through its handling of errors. We can see these forensics in action by observing how the system isolated and processed Qutayba's single, most famous failure. That failure was a corrupted data point that temporarily slipped through the network, known today as the Tabuk Hadith. The text of this report claimed that during the Tabuk expedition, the Prophet combined his daily prayers before the sun passed its zenith. Early network critics immediately flagged this text. It sharply contradicted the heavily established legal parameters regarding the specific timing of daily prayers. When the critics began their audit, they identified the first major network error, a property known as tafarrud. Tafarrud is defined as a total lack of lateral corroboration. It means a node is reporting data that no one else in the network possesses. In this chain of transmission, the isnad, the text supposedly flowed from the companion Mu'adh to Abu al-Tufayl, to Yazid, and down to al-Layth. But from al-Layth, there is only a single connection flowing directly to Qutayba. None of al-Layth's other students reported it. Isolation alone doesn't automatically mean a text is fabricated. However, a massive, uncorroborated legal claim transmitted by a single node triggers a mandatory system-wide audit. That audit revealed a second fatal red flag, shudhudh, which translates to irregularity. The critics cross-referenced their broader data lake to verify the historical reporting habits of the older nodes higher up in the transmission chain. They examined Yazid ibn Abi Habib, who supposedly passed the text to al-Layth. The search yielded a null result, 0 record of Yazid transmitting this text to his other students. Moving higher to Abu al-Tufayl, they found the exact same 0 record anomaly. The chain was structurally alien. It did not belong to the established network topology of those specific historical scholars. This presented a paradox. The structural data of the chain is provably false, but the transmitter delivering it, Qutayba, is a verified, highly reliable hub. The critics now had to debug the network. They needed to find the exact moment of contamination without burning down a vital, pristine hub node. To resolve the paradox, the scholars employed a precise forensic interrogation to debug the anomaly directly at its source. The canonical compiler Bukhari took direct action, tracking down Qutayba to personally cross-examine him. Bukhari asked a crucial, hyper-specific question. Who were you writing with when you took this hadith from al-Layth? Relying on his transparent, meticulous ledgers, Qutayba provided the missing variable. Another student, Khalid al-Madayni, was sitting with him during that specific dictation. Bukhari immediately identified Khalid al-Madayni as the threat vector in this transmission. Khalid was a known bad actor who utilized a specific method of data injection known to the critics as talqin. Talqin is slipping fabricated texts into the manuscripts of a scholar while they are distracted, laundering fake data through a legitimate teacher. Khalid had injected the text into the session. Qutayba, acting as a faithful recorder, had simply written down what was presented. The audit was complete. Al-Layth didn't say it, and Qutayba didn't invent it. Qutayba had honestly recorded a malicious injection, allowing the critics to isolate the bad vector and discard the corrupted data. This leaves a logical follow-up question. Why did this provable, documented error not destroy Qutayba's status as a reliable transmitter? The answer lies in the concept of statistical tolerance within early Islamic text criticism. We have to recall Qutayba's established baseline. He had successfully transmitted over 100,000 verified accurate texts. When the network critics evaluated his standing, they measured one known injected error against 100,000 successful peer-reviewed transmissions. This diagram represents that ratio, a massive, dense field of verified data points reflecting a lifetime of execution. Against that vast dataset, the single corrupted text is a microscopic, highly isolated anomaly. The sheer volume of his accurate data provided a statistical shield against this systemic failure. His accuracy rate was so high that an isolated slip was mathematically negligible. True scientific rigor doesn't demand impossible human perfection. It relies on datasets large enough and auditing protocols strict enough to make isolated anomalies statistically insignificant. The resolution of the Tabuk anomaly leaves us with a profound historiographical takeaway. There is a modern assumption that the transition from oral memory to written records in antiquity was inherently fragile, chaotic, or reliant on unverified mythology. The successful isolation of the Tabuk report demonstrates the high level of fidelity these 9th century scholars could achieve through cross-referencing. The early Islamic system of biographical evaluation, known as jarh wa ta'dil, functioned as an advanced, almost cryptographic network defense. These scholars utilized rigorous peer review to hunt for anomalies and inconsistencies across the network. They actively hunted for anomalies. They mapped out the transmission network, stress-tested the nodes, and quarantined the bad actors. The Islamic Hadith canon represents the surviving output of an extensive, peer-reviewed data verification network.